Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here and welcome to my review of the Meze 109 Pros. These are the pros. Of course, these are an upgrade to the 99 Classics, and a lot of people are claiming that these are an upgrade to the Sennheiser HD650. How true is that is something we'll try to find out, but of course this is by way of a review of the 109 Pro because I've not yet reviewed this on my channel. So this is also going to be an attempt to talk about this and in terms of what it sounds like to me. So, Meze is such an interesting company because once they first came out with the Empyrean, that's around when I really got into the hobby and I was just fascinated by pictures of the Empyrean. The Empyrean is so picturesque. It's a beautiful headphone. John Darko has amazing videos. His editing is just at a different level. I love Darko. Darko does everything under the sun. He does TWS, sci-fi, 2-channel IMs, headphones, but I really liked Darko when I began in the hobby, and I still watch Darko. So Darko really talked up the Empyrean, which I'm certain drove a lot of sales for Meze Audio, and I'm glad it did because the Empyrean is a good headphone. Since then, we've had a wave of mainstream headphone reviewers who have criticized the Empyrean for not adhering to the Harman target for what they perceive as an offensive amount of upper treble, for what they perceive as a very a muddy lower mid upper bass region. And people slammed it. A lot of people slammed it, but then I did listen to it and I did try to offer my views on it, which were positive. I did try several different sources with it, and I found that more incisive sources, as you would guess, work better with Empyrean. As a matter of fact, I even found this DAP, the Aslan Current SP2000T, which works like magic with Empyrean. Okay, so the reason I say all that, or I talk about that background, is because this is the headphone that I think has been universally lauded by the reviewer community, almost as much as they have criticized Empyrean, which is a bit weird, because insofar as the price ranges go, I don't, in a nutshell, by way of a TLDR, perceive this to be any better than the Empyrean. So the Empyrean, for what it does at $3,000, it's not worse than what this does for $800. I think they're pretty good for the price points. An A- headphone, I would say, for the respective price points. Just like the Empyrean, this has impeccable build quality, and I just love its build quality. I do think some reviewers have pointed out the spring steel structure, which is something that is inherited from the 99 Classics. This does feel a little tacky, a little cheap. It doesn't really go with the rest of the leather and fine wood aesthetics with rose gold accents. And look at this texture here on the wood. It's just fantastic. It's got the steampunk meets Batman vibes with these fins that remind me of Batman and these grills, metal grills here. And you can see through the drivers here and through the cups, and these are some stunning looking grills. And then you have the super duper comfortable pads. These pads are so comfortable, I can squeeze them for days. But in any case, I digress. It's also very, very ergonomic. There's a bit of a clamp, but it's nothing to write home about. The self-adjusting mechanism is among the best in the market. Yeah, it's just a goddamn work of art. So I do understand people hyping it because it's a work of art, but the Empyrean was even more of a work of art. And these people slammed it. I do think people like it because it's got more of a pinna gain relative to the bass, and I feel like a lot of people who wanted to like the Empyrean but couldn't because they are beholden to the Harman target, then gravitated towards this because this is closer to the Harman target insofar as the pinna gain goes. So let's talk about its tonality. Okay, tonality wise, guys, this has bass. This does sound bassy and punchy. It's got a dynamic driver inside. It is not a planar unlike the Empyrean and the Elite and the Empyrean 2. It's a biocellulose driver that is coated with beryllium, which is intended to have the effect of combining the tonal richness and tonal saturation of biocellulose with the speed of beryllium, and that does seem to have an effect on the sound because there is a certain amount of speed to the transients that I perceive, and then there is a certain amount of richness and punch and slam as well. But I do want to disclaim that for those of you who are sub-bass aficionados, sub-bass first audiophiles, this to me is more of a mid-bassy headphone. The mid-bass is not enormous, so there's nothing to worry about, because a lot of you, I think, hear mid-bass and just you start running, because a lot of you have been goaded into thinking that mid-bass is a bad word or bad expression, because it's not a word, it's two words. Or maybe it's a word, mid-hyphenated bass, whatever. Mid-bass is not always a bad thing. There are headphones and IMs that have mastered mid-bass. The For Audio XT6 is an example. More and more, the more artful tunings that you see in the IM part of the hobby have found ways to express beauty through mid-bass rather. So the Campfire Trifecta is a fantastic example of mid-bass done right. So don't knock mid-bass. This doesn't have a whole lot of mid-bass, however. The mid-bass is mostly energetic in the upper mid-bass, around 100 hertz. So it's not there in the upper bass or lower mid-range. It's pretty clean. So it does still sound a bit lean despite having energy in that region, which is a different thing that I'll get to. However, what happens with sub-bass is that sub-bass does not sound as present as mid-bass. So it has sub-bass, it is fairly well extended, and you have mid-bass, which is slightly higher. And although on the graph they're close, when you hear it as slightly more distant. So when you hear it, it's more sub-bassy it's more mid-bassy than sub-bassy, if that makes any sense. Moving on to the mid-range. The mid-range is pretty flat, but around 1 to 2 kilohertz, there's a bit of a dip, very Hyphaman-like dip, which for Hyphaman gives a sense of stage depth. This also does have the same effect of stage depth because of the dip in 1 to 2 kilohertz, but I still don't think that stage depth is as pronounced as I get often with Hyphaman headphones. 3 to 4 kilohertz is very filled out and is very Harman-like. Lower treble is very Harman-like, and the filled out nature of the 3 to 4 kilohertz range means that you do get some fantastic female vocals with this. Female vocals sound fantastic. Brandy Carlisle she sounded like a goddess, as did Tori Amos. I mean, I played so much female vocals on this that I just couldn't stop. Treble, or upper treble rather, is where it starts to become interesting because it establishes its own character. 10 kilohertz above, around 12, and then especially around 15, this has a lot of energy. Now, this I think was intentional. However, in a lot of cases when IMs or headphones have a lot of air frequency energy, you'll see that the tuner, or the manufacturer rather, will work to give it a little more mid-bass or lower mids to balance out the air frequency, and that does not happen here. Insofar as the graph goes, it looks like it's going to be a very bright affair, but in listening, I do think that is not as bad. I do think the cable makes a difference, and I know cable science is not fully explored by the audiophile community. I mean, we do have at our disposal some measurement systems, especially the frequency response graph, and people think that if it doesn't show in the FR, it doesn't exist. That's wrong. I've talked about this in my videos. Show me how FR captures the difference in timbre between BA bass and dynamic driver bass for IMs. Dynamic driver bass sounds punchier, more tactile, and just better and more realistic than BA bass. Show me how an FR graph is able to capture that. You'll not be able to, because you can have BA bass on a graph look exactly like a dynamic driver bass, but in listening, they'll sound worlds apart. So the FR is not the end all be all to talk about sound, and it certainly does not capture the complexity of the listening experience. Cables make a difference. I'm not the only one who talks about this nowadays. Kurawang talked about this, and kudos to Kurawang. Among the more mainstream headphone reviewers, and among those reviewers who were to some extent of my generation, meaning who started working around the same time as I did with content and stuff, like Wave Theory also talks about this, and I think Wave Theory is working on it, so I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say, and I'm in touch with him. He's a great guy. So in any case, the problem is a lot of audiophiles and reviewers don't have a training in audio science, right? I mean, it's one thing to DIY and learn yourself, but it's another thing to be schooled into audio science and audiology. Without the latter, I think we all take ourselves too seriously, and we think we have all the measurements we need at our disposal. And to deny measurements at our disposal somehow simplistically gets equated to anti-science thinking by simpletons. I'm sorry to say. It's not anti-science. It's just, it's pro-science to question the validity and the applicability of certain measurements. And in any case, so I'm a pro-science guy, just for the record. So it doesn't really sound as bright as it graphs, and that is worth keeping in mind. But it still sounds airy. So on tracks that are not well mastered, it does sound a bit brutal. But it does have a lot of pros, right? Because like Chris Cornell's voice, I think, benefits from air frequencies because his voice sounds breathy and it sounds wonderful. I think a lot of string instruments also benefit because you get a wonderful sense of, air around instruments. Now to segue to talk about technical performance, I think this is very resolving, but not as resolving as other headphones, especially like high-frequency headphones in this price class, or even the Focal Clear, because Focal Clear and high-frequency headphones, I think, do out-resolve this. This does have better timbre than either Focal headphones or high-frequency headphones. It can match a high-frequency headphone for punch and slam, but a Focal headphone like a Focal Clear would supersede this for punch and slam. All these headphones, Focal and high-frequency that I'm talking about, the Ananda SE, the Ananda Nano, and to some extent the original Aria or the Aria Stealth, all can be had for around this sort of price point of $800, used or new, which is the reason why I'm clumping all of them together. So its competitors are Focal Clear, Ananda, Ananda Nano, Ananda SE, Edition XS. Edition XS is cheaper, but I do think it's more resolving. To talk about staging, it doesn't have a particularly wide stage. I do think high-frequency headphones, those oval headphones, have fantastic stage, right? So those stage better. It does stage better than the Focal Clear, which has a very narrow stage. Stage depth is similar to all these headphones. High-frequency headphones also surpass this for stage height, but it does surpass all these aforementioned headphones for timbre, for essential sense of punch and slam, with the exception of the Focal Clear, which is unbeatable at this price point for punch and slam. And finally, for overall cohesiveness, I do think this sounds extremely cohesive, and in many ways far more cohesive than planars can sound sometimes. So it is a wonderful headphone for $800. I understand the hype. Now, is it an upgrade to the Sennheiser HD650? It is. It's a more resolving headphone. It's had a wider stage, perhaps better dynamics. This still has that languid lower mid-range, mid-bass that gives it warmth. This still has that lovely, lovely, lovely warmth that only this does, which means this I still think does vocals better. So, but yes, this can be considered an upgrade if you want an airier version of the HD650, while I guess foregoing some of its romantic character, because this is a slightly more audiophile sort of headphone that I think is going to work better with jazz and other audiophile genres in being able to conjure up the sense of atmospherics that I think a lot of these higher-end headphones are meant to do, which this does not. This is not very good at conjuring up atmospherics. By that I mean a sense of the space in which the recording happens is not as well conveyed here as is the case here. So in some ways it is an upgrade, but of course you lose some and you gain some. And as far as cables go, guys, this is made by Ear Audio, which is a cable manufacturer based out of India. You might have heard me big him up a bit. I don't have any business affiliation with this guy. I just like talking about, things that I think need to be talked about because they're not getting their due attention. These cables sell for, I think, $250 to $300. So they're very cheap. This is the ARC series that they have, and they sound fantastic because what these do, every headphone, and especially with the Meze 109 Pro, is that this fills out some of the sort of the relative lack of presence of sub bass. That this, I think, makes the bass a little more present, and somehow this makes the entire frequency response a little more present. So it's like listening to music with, let's say, for example, if before this cable you had a glass sort of partition between yourself and the performance. This breaks through the glass, and it's not the same as getting more clarity. You just get a little more transparency with this cable. And at the same time, I think the air frequency energy is a bit reined in. So I highly recommend Ear Audio's cables, the ARC series. And this is a fantastic headphone, guys. And do try to sort of see if you can get your hand on this cable, because it does sound fantastic with the Meze 109 Pro, as it does with a bunch of other headphones. The stock cables are not very great. They're not ergonomic, and there's one long cable, one short cable, and yeah, they feel very cheap and plasticky. And I'm not going to talk much about the unboxing, but of course has a wonderful sort of this Aztec aesthetic going on in terms of this labyrinthine design. Almost looks like a cross section of an Aztec pyramid, and then it opens up and you get this cutout which houses this carrying case. So it does come with a carrying case, which I have lying around somewhere. But my goal here was to quickly discuss my views on this headphone, guys. I do like this headphone a lot. I would give it an A minus, a solid A minus for its price point. This is still it's a very relevant headphone still in 2024. But as always, because it does have certain tuning quirks, like this excess amount of air frequency energy, do check it out and do auditions first if you can, and don't blind buy. That's it for me. Sajid Ami signing out, and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.